Debate, Senator Elizabeth Warren made an unexpected promise. Warren vowed that if elected president, she will hold an annual ceremony in the Rose Garden during which she'll read the name of every transgender American murdered during the previous year. Watch.
Here's a promise I make. I will go to the Rose Garden once every year to read the names of transgender women, of people of color who have been killed in the past year.
So that may have been the first time you've heard anything about that topic, and you may have wondered just how many transgender women of color were murdered last year and why. But Warren didn't say. And yet that didn't stop the Human Rights Campaign, a highly aggressive Democratic pressure group, from immediately endorsing her position. There is, the organization claimed in a statement, a, quote, epidemic of violence against transgender people, especially trans women of color, end quote. Again, no specifics there, but total vehemence. It's an epidemic, they told us. Mayor Pete Buttigieg soon leapt in to agree. The murder of transgender women of color, Buttigieg says, is one of America's most pressing problems.
I do want to acknowledge what these demonstrators were speaking about, which is the epidemic of violence against black trans women in this country right now. And I believe, or would like to believe, that everybody here is committed to ending that epidemic, and that does include lifting up its visibility and speaking to it.
Nobody in the room questioned Buttigieg's description. They seemed to take it at face value. In fact, if anything, the other candidates and major press outlets confirmed it. Quote, the murder of black transgender women is becoming a crisis, the Washington Post told its readers. Quote, for trans women of color facing epidemic of violence, wrote ABC News, each day is a fight for survival. Meanwhile, the American Medical Association, a group politicized beyond recognition but still treated respectfully by the news media, declared violence against transgendered people a, quote, epidemic, like diphtheria or smallpox. In other words, this is serious. It's not a boutique political issue. It's a public health crisis. Well, that means it's time to see the numbers behind these claims, the numbers that Pete Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren didn't mention. So exactly how many transgendered people are murdered every year in this country? Well, there are a number of stats we could choose from, but just for the sake of argument, let's go with the numbers supplied by the highly partisan left-wing Human Rights Campaign, which, as noted, is the very group pushing the idea that this amounts to, quote, an epidemic. So according to the Human Rights Campaign, in 2018, a total of 26 transgendered Americans were murdered. Now, that's 26 too many, of course. Every murder is a tragedy, very much including these. But does 26 constitute an epidemic? Well, let's break it down. A few years ago, the Williams Institute estimated that 1.4 million American adults identify as transgender. If that figure is correct, then in 2018, the murder rate for transgendered people was 1.8 per 100,000. Now, while granting again that every murder is too many, relatively speaking, that is a very low rate. In fact, it's barely one-third the murder rate for the general population in this country, which in 2018 was 4.9 murders per 100,000 people. In other words, not only is there no epidemic of transgender murders in America, according to these numbers, the ones supplied by the Human Rights Campaign itself, transgendered people are on average safer than your typical American. In other words, once again, they have been lying to you in the most brazen possible way, telling you something that's completely untrue, factually untrue, and yet scolding you at the very same time. It's bewildering, but it's also their signature move. Meanwhile, and don't tell the Democratic Party or the media, both of which seem totally unaware of it and not interested, but there is an all too real epidemic of murder taking place in this country right now, and it's not in the relatively affluent transgendered community. It's in the poorest parts of our major cities. Killings in Baltimore, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Charlotte, St. Louis, pick a city, have all skyrocketed compared to just 5 years ago. Thousands are dying as a result. It's awful. But if you're looking for an epidemic to worry about, one that's actually changing the composition of this country, nothing beats opioids.